There are plenty of people that have your skills. Plenty of people out there in the world. And many of them are more skilled than you will ever be. But nobody in this whole wide world has your story. Not one other person. It may be similar, but it's not your story. Why are you not leveraging that more? It is the one thing that makes you stand out and will make you stand out among anything else.
Hey, Creating Maven. I'm Joy Spencer, your Reframe specialist, with one important message. Your real work, it's not your job or your career. Your real work is what you create. And what you create is what sets you apart and makes you incomparable. It's your legacy. I'm here to show you a whole new way of working so you can create with your gifts, make a unique contribution, and finally get paid to be yourself. This is Reframe to Create. Do you know what your story is and why it's so important for you to have a handle on it for your work? Do you know how to overcome your fear of telling your story and know what's enough to share and what's really just too much? Do you know why tapping into the universal theme, lesson, or moral of your story is more important than story details? Do you know what the connection is between storytelling and creating? No? Well, you're in luck, my creating maven, because in today's episode, you're going to learn all this and more from my guest, who is Bennett, 2-time Emmy-nominated filmmaker, writer, keynote speaker, and fellow storytelling coach with over 15 years of experience producing documentary films. I first connected with Rain because I was looking for storytelling podcasts and came across his The Storytelling Lab podcast, an excellent vault of information and inspiration about all things storytelling, so you should definitely check it out. Rain's company is 6 Second Stories, and he helps purpose-driven companies and organizations to create short-form, heartfelt video stories to promote their audiences to take action. He joined me at Reframe to Create to do what he does best, and that is to help people like you leverage storytelling to grow your community, deepen your connections, maximize your impact in minimal time, and of course, the reason why we're all here, to create. We got right into it. So, Rain, what do stories have to do with it?
What do stories have to do with it? What's love got to do with it, Joy? Stories have to do with all of it. That's the thing. And by all of it, I mean humans, human connection. That's what stories have to do with it, right? And this has always been the way that we have connected because it has always been the way we communicate. Everything that we do comes back to communicating and connecting as people. So that's all stories are. And what you do once you create that human connection is totally dependent upon what your mission is, what your purpose is. So we can use it for brand storytelling. We can use it just to make laughter and connect and have fun when we're like out and about with people. We can use it for leadership. We can use it for community building. We can use it for navigating trauma, emotional and psychological trauma. Stories are simply the way humans communicate. And when we communicate our shared experiences, we create connections. And then it's up to us what we do from those connections.
Well, thank you for breaking it down for us, because I think that as what I call my listeners, creating mavens, that's what I call them, I think sometimes it can be not so clear what the connection is with stories to creating more in life and making that connection. So it seems like how you're breaking it down is that this is about communication. This is about human connection. And that is just basic and foundational to everything about who we are.
Absolutely. And here's the thing. What I think you're getting at, because I see it too, is that it's kind of a buzzword now, which I think is a good thing. Some people think it's a bad thing because it like might dilute it or something like that. But no, it's a good thing. But I think people hear it and they're like, well, what does that mean? It's a vague term. And classically, what do we do as people? We overthink. We overcomplicate things that are really that simple. So I just try to bring people down back to the, to the ground level, right? Feet on the ground, just like it's not that complicated. It's just how we communicate, and it's how we've always communicated, and we always will. We communicate through our emotions. You weave your information in there, but it's simply just how we communicate, and we overthink it and try to understand like, well, what is storytelling and how do I do it? And I'm not a good storyteller. You say creating mavens. That's your audience, right?
Yeah.
So people will say, this is classic too, like, well, I'm just not that creative, or I'm just not a great storyteller. Like, and this is what I always correct them with, like, yeah, you are, because you're human, and so you're by nature you are a storyteller, period. Good or bad. The only thing that makes you a good storyteller versus someone else is practice. Like anything else, you are inherently a storyteller because you are human. Full stop.
How did you come to this level of clarity about storytelling, what it is and what it means to you and your work?
So I became clear and confident about the power of stories a couple of different ways. I mean, now that I can look back at my life, I suppose I always subconsciously or innately knew it because I've always been attracted to it. Not knew it the way I know it now, but just, again, humans are natural storytellers. So we don't have to learn this. It's within us. We might have to tap into ourselves to really like find it for sure. Or if we haven't practiced that skill, we might have to practice it, but it's within us. So I was always attracted to stories. As a child, I wrote stories. I loved movies. I'm in the film world still. So, I was on plays and musicals and church and school. I mean, this has always been a part of my life, television, et cetera, et cetera. But it wasn't until, and then I pursued a career in filmmaking. So still in the storytelling space. But it wasn't until I did my, flagship film. I don't know what you want to call it. My labor of love, my passion project. I don't want to say masterpiece because I'm not done yet, right? But at the time, it was like, this is a project that I wanted to tell. I was doing stories for clients for years. I'd started a business. And then this was a story I wanted to tell. No money, no backing. And I went around the world filming this fitness subculture. And the movie's called Raise Up the World is Our Gym. And I made this movie, and it was a very tough 5-6 year process. And it had a happy ending. My story, the not necessarily the movie, but like we sold it to Red Bull TV. But afterwards, I was exhausted. And so I looked back at like, okay, I need some alignment in my career. I was kind of bouncing back between projects. And when I was finished, that project was done. And it didn't lead necessarily to anything else unless I wanted to make the sequel. And at that point, I was just done with that culture. I needed some space. But I knew that I couldn't just keep starting at square one. So I was like, well, I got to look at the lessons that I learned through this process because it was an arduous process. And I was transformed as a person and as a filmmaker and a storyteller. And it was at that point when I realized that like my philosophy, because I had suffered from imposter syndrome because I'm not very technically gifted. I would say I'm creative, but I'm not like a great cinematographer or like a lot of my peers and contemporaries were in the filmmaking world. So I had a lot of imposter syndrome, but I could shoot. I just wasn't, that's not my thing. I'm not a very technical person. What I realized is through that process, when I didn't have any money or any crew, it was just me and a camera, is that at least my philosophy is the story comes first. And if you focus on the story and connecting with people's hearts and emotions, then the technical details don't matter as much. Of course they matter. And what you really want to do is have the best of both worlds and hit them in the heart feels and then have great production quality too. But you can sacrifice the production quality if you have a great story, not the other way around. You can have the best cinematography in the world, and if you don't have a compelling story that connects to people's hearts and emotions, it will fall flat. It simply will. So then I realized like, hey, this kind of became my filmmaking and storytelling style. Let me dive into that more because I then realized, well, who is an audience that would benefit from that? Now everybody's a creator, a creating maven, right? It's your business or your side hustle or your life or whatever. Almost everybody is creating content for their brands, for their passions, for their hobbies. Even if it's not your job, you might have one for your woodworking projects that you do on the weekends. You might have an Instagram page, right? So again, storytelling is embedded in everything we do in terms of communication. So there's a huge audience for people who aren't super technical writers, filmmakers, or artists, but they are tasked with creating consistent content that connects with people. So could they benefit from the lessons that I learned the hard way through filmmaking? Absolutely. So at that point, I realized storytelling was the pillar, the foundation that I had kind of built my filmmaking philosophy off of. And then I just dove in, Joy. I mean, the next 3 to 4 years just consumed everything I could. I started a podcast. I had storytelling experts and my heroes on the show. I read every book. I just really fully went in. I read research articles, et cetera, and learned every single thing I could about storytelling. And then it's funny because now when you look back at it, it's like, this is also something that people inherently know. Any good speaker or orator or leader might not know storytelling the way I do, where I can explain exactly neurologically what's going on, etc. But they always, any good salesperson, they always inherently know. Any good politician, they know that stories are the way to connect with people because people connect with each other through emotions.
So there's something I'm picking up from how you're describing this, and specifically how you came to storytelling and how yours was different. And that's service. You didn't have the technical prowess, in your opinion, that others might have had, but you were thinking about your audience and how you could serve them. You were thinking about people and how you could connect to them. And there's something powerful about turning our attentions away from all the things and all the reasons, right, where people are like, I'm not a good storyteller, I'm not this, I'm not that, all the ways in which we focus on ourselves or the technicalities of things. And then if you're focused on the person that's in front of you, whether you're telling a story, whether you're creating something, how can I, in some small way, connect to make their life better? If you're focused on others and service, there's so much more that you can do than you might think, because you get distracted by the perfection and all the other things that you think are required of you. Because I know that, people are like it's what you said, oh, I'm not a good storyteller, I'm not this, I'm not that. When people get into thinking about themselves, they miss that they're telling stories all the time with their lives and with their friends in so many different ways. And so it's sort of like getting out of your own head, getting out of all of that stuff and thinking back to the person in front of you. How can I serve this person?
We could honestly stop the conversation right there. Like it's such an amazing point. And once you flip that switch from focusing on yourself and the voices in your head, the stories that you're telling yourself, right? And focus on who you're trying to help and serve, then we lose all of that. We lose all of those concerns because it's really about that person or those people. And we stop trying to psych ourselves out. This is 100% true. And it is just a switch, but it's hard to do sometimes because we're also naturally wired to want to protect ourselves and focus on ourselves. That's a survival instinct that's been there since the beginning of humanity, just like stories have been. But when we're using it, especially in our brands, to serve people, you got to make that switch, and then you stop psyching yourself out. And an example for that exact movie is I was worried because, I'm one person. I had to kind of shoot from the hip. I couldn't, make it real polished. Some things might be a little bit out of focus, or like their action started happening, over here, and I'd have to shift and grab it. And so it might not be perfect videography or cinematography. But when I started thinking about the story I was telling and the culture it was about, this wasn't a polished culture. It was, it started in the parks and playgrounds, this calisthenics movement, right? So it was real gritty and raw and from the street anyway. And so the film having this kind of like in the moment feel where it might be a little bit rough around the edges, like it's not perfect because I couldn't stop the action. So it might be a little out of focus. It actually played well to the feeling, of the tone of the film. And once I realized that, I leaned into it. And I was like, this shouldn't be a super smooth. The culture is not that. When you're seeing what these people were doing on a pull-up bar, it was rough, rugged, and raw and amazing. And it wasn't this prim, proper, perfectly produced thing. It was all freestyle. And therefore the film became that way too. And then secondly, nobody who was falling in love with this calisthenics culture that the film was about, and at that time it was very niche, now it's very mainstream or becoming that way. Nobody cared if a shot was out of focus. They're just seeing something that they loved on screen that hadn't been represented before, right? So they're seeing their community and their culture projected onto the big screen, or a DVD made out of their community and their culture. They couldn't care less that it wasn't perfect cinematography because it was about the story. And it took me making that switch that we're talking about to relax and let those hangups go that I had and just lean into it and make something for the community and for the culture. And that's why it was successful.
And that's the gift that storytelling can give. It can help other people feel seen, by you when you're telling your story. So you're helping other people feel seen, right? You're telling your story, but how do you move past the fear of you yourself being seen, all that vulnerability that might need to happen, and especially in the workplace? So a lot of people listening are professionals, so storytelling is all fine and great, right? If you're like, yeah, that's your profession, that's the thing that you do. But I'm someone who's working in an office, and, there's all this talk about diversity and inclusion. There's all this talk about being vulnerable and being authentic. And it's like, how vulnerable and how authentic do I want to be, especially when people are inviting me to tell my story? What is it going to take to move into that. And then still like, why is this so important? Like what, I know you said like, yes, stories are important for connecting, but really like, do I really need to do all of that?
So here we are again. The way to overcome that fear of vulnerability, of sharing your story, which is a real fear, is by making that switch and focusing on who you're trying to help. It's not easy. And I understand that. But if you're focused on who you're trying to help with that story or with that lesson, it does make it easier and less about you, and you're out of your head a little bit too. However, on the flip side, just because we're encouraging people to be vulnerable and share their stories does not mean you have to share all your gory details, okay? There is a line. There's a point where it becomes oversharing. And then that is about you and not the people you're trying to help. So you don't have to share everything. All you have to do is open up and be a little bit vulnerable so you can say, I struggled. And you don't have to go into exactly the details, but like this was the hardest thing I had to navigate. I started a new job and it was scary, right? Just saying that, we understand like, I've been there before. You didn't have to say, I almost divorced my wife and, all these sorts of things. You don't have to go in that detail. You just have to open up the door a little bit to conjure up that emotion and that connection. So people often think that you have to tell it all, and you don't. You need to focus on what are you trying to accomplish with that story, for whom you're telling it to. And then that will inform you of like, how much of it do you need to share? Now, if I'm a woman speaking to a group of, battered women, at a shelter, right, that have been through domestic violence and abuse, I'm going to have to share a certain level of what I went through, but I know that audience, they're going to understand. And again, I don't have to go all into the super gory details, but because they all have a certain understanding, I know that that's a safe space for me to share a significant amount, versus if I was just talking to random people or people at a business conference about domestic violence, I might not need to bring them down into exactly what happened. You see what I mean? Like, it depends on the audience who you're speaking to. But by no means does being vulnerable mean share everything, and I think we all get that, right? There's a point where you're just airing too much of your dirty laundry, and it's not necessary. And the more you focus on who you're speaking to and why, it will help you understand how you can do that and how much you need to share of that story.
And I think a good measure of that is also how much healing have you done?
Yeah.
How much healing have you done yourself around that particular matter, topic, or issue? Are you, as you're sharing, are you like bursting into tears? Are you reliving the experience? Maybe that's not something that you're ready to share at this point. But if you've processed through it and you definitely have yourself figured out what is the lesson, what was the lesson for me, and you can share the story with the lesson, then you're probably ready to share that.
This is such a great point. Fully understanding what's the point of the story you're telling. What is the lesson learned? And when we're in it, we haven't learned the lesson yet. So when you're asking yourself, well, what story should I tell? You have to really ask that first. What is the message I'm trying to convey? Because when I tell a story to a group of people, and let's say we're at a conference and I told a story during my keynote speech, and you didn't make that speech, and you asked someone who was there, like, hey, what was Rain's speech about? They wouldn't say, if you just had a very quick second, like, they wouldn't regurgitate the story that I told necessarily. They would say, oh, it was about overcoming your fears and letting go, or whatever the theme is, the lesson learned, the universal theme. The details of your story aren't as important. It's all about the emotional transformation that happened. That's how you're helping people. And that's why, Joy, you could tell a story about something that doesn't relate to who you're talking to, as long as the lesson learned does. So that's why in a business event, I can tell a personal story, as long as the message or the lesson learned of that personal story is applicable to the theme or the lesson we're talking about that day in business, right? We're still emotional humans, emotional beings, whether it's in our personal lives or our business lives. So yeah, asking yourself, what's the moral of the story, they call it, right? And if you haven't identified that yet, it will make it hard to make that choice of how vulnerable should I be? What story should I tell? Where do I start? Where does it end? Et cetera, et cetera.
I hadn't thought about that, how important it is really to focus on the universal theme. I mean, I always know that that's important in the work that I do with folks, but I've always been more focused on, let's make sure the story is engaging. Let's pull out all the details. Let's, just sort of staying in that space of delivering and all of that. But what you're pointing out is that we really need to be focused on how, again, back to the human connection. Stories are not about necessarily the intricate details of my specific story, but it's about how does this connect? How can we connect with this broader? So if your focus again is on that, serving that purpose, and that's what that universal theme does, is it takes you out of your head and all the specifics of your detail and back into what's the universal human connection piece here.
Totally. This is a good point. It's similar to focusing too much on the technical details of the videography or cinematography, right? If I'm worried, and you hear this all the time, you got to have a great hook. It's like, if I'm just worried about the hook and keeping people engaged, yes, you need all of that. You definitely need all of that. But if I'm worried about that first and don't do the work of understanding what's the point of me telling this story, then that's not going to be enough. You're focused on the wrong thing. So you have to do that pre-work of understanding, well, what's the point of this story? And then, yes, you need to worry about hooking people. But if you tell a great story, you don't need to worry so much about that, because they will be hooked, right? If you tell a good story and it has a good point, because that point should be directed at who they are as people. So they'll listen because they're already resonating with it. And that's why, because so many people ask the question, like, well, what story should I tell? These are the thoughts that you have to have. It's like, well, what's the takeaway? Now, listen, if you're telling, I compete sometimes in story slams, like 5-minute story competitions. That's for entertainment value only, right? And so if I'm telling a story there, I'm not trying to inspire action in the audience. I'm just trying to win the competition. So that doesn't have to be as much. But when we're talking about brand storytelling or storytelling in our businesses, there should be a point and a purpose and a goal attached to it. It doesn't always have to be, if I'm just telling a story at the bar and to make my friends laugh, it's not necessarily tied to that. But if I'm telling a story in business, there should be a point tied to it, or else I'm just serving myself and telling a story for telling a story's sake versus trying to influence and impact someone.
What do you think people who are in the world of work are not getting, missing, or overlooking when it comes to storytelling?
Oh, lots. People overcomplicate things and overthink things. So often in storytelling, we make it way harder than it is. One major mistake people make is thinking that they have one story to tell. And you can't tell one. Like, how are you going to tell your whole business's story, and that's your brand story? That's what people think. Or your whole life story if you're sharing your personal journey to help people. You can't cover it. And I had this conversation very recently with a coaching client, and I was like, listen, what is a TV show you like? And we were talking about The Sopranos. I was like, The Sopranos, I think it was 6 seasons, right? And there was a whole arc for that 6 seasons. And then each season had its own arc. Each episode in each season had its own arc, and each scene in each episode in each season had its own arc. But if you're trying to tell your whole business or whole brand story or your whole life story, that's going to take 6 seasons like The Sopranos did. You can't do that. What you need to understand is find all those little stories within the story and tell those, and you decide that, and you understand which one to tell by understanding what the point is you're trying to make to the audience you're specifically speaking to at that moment. So if my audience is this type of audience, then I look at it and say, oh, that story from season 2, episode 7 is perfect for this situation.
I like that. So you're thinking, who am I serving? What is the impact I want to have with them? And there are multiple ways, multiple scenes, multiple stories that I have that I could pick from my story bank of sorts to serve them with. So on that, how do you go about creating or developing a story bank or something where people can do the pre-work to be ready to have a number of different stories that they can pull from?
Yes. Okay. I love this question. I don't want you to master one story. That's like me teaching you how to play one song on the piano, right? I want you to learn how to read music and how to make music. I want you to be a storyteller. And spoiler alert, you're human, so you already are. What I want people to do is be able to see the opportunities for stories all around them, because they're floating all around you all day long. They're there. You're living them right now. Now, the question is this story I'm living right now, or that happened this morning, or that will happen tonight, worth telling? Will there be a lesson involved? Because all a story is a sequence of events that created change, that created some transformation. That's it. So
Okay, say that again.
a story is a sequence of events that has effected change, that has created transformation. Something changed, right? So we're living a story right now, Joy. This is going to be a story. It's going to be a sequence of events. There was a beginning, there's a middle, and it will end, right? That will be a story. Now, only after it ends can we know if this story of our podcast, of our conversation today, is worth telling to someone later today or next week or next year, right? Determined by, well, what happened in that story? Was the transformation powerful? Is there a lesson to be learned? And it might not be, but it is a little story. Now, later today, I may go pick up my kids from school and I may almost get in a wreck, and that will conjure up something in me, some emotions that people will be able to relate to, right? We've all been there. And I might pull up beside that person who is then rolling down their window, and I think they cut me off and they're going to flip me the bird. And now I'm getting even madder. And then I see them hold up their hands and mouth the words, "I'm so sorry." And now all the tension drops off of my shoulders. And I realize, look, it's not about what almost happened, what could have happened. It's all about making it safely where we are and learning how to let go. And that's a perfect little real life example of a story. Now I can tell that story and it be effective to someone. In fact, I told that story to a graduate class that I taught last week, and everybody understood that moment and they understood the lesson. So the story of how I determined what I ate for breakfast this morning may not be compelling enough for me to share, but it is a story. It is an option for a story. So I want to recalibrate people's brains to see that's a sequence of events that changed the way I viewed things. And that story of going to pick up my kids, that changed my perspective. I was all amped up and ready to yell at somebody. And then I realized it's not that serious and nothing happened. We didn't wreck. So move on with our days. Don't cause it to ruin the rest of our day, you know? So that was a transformation that happened. Maybe that story would be worth telling, maybe it won't, but it is a qualified story to tell. And so that's what I want people to do, is be able to see them, track back and think about it. Where was a time in my life or business where something changed? Was it, I don't know, March of 2020? Did you experience a change? Yeah, everybody in the world did.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
In June of 2020, when you realized it wasn't really going away, probably another change happened where you realize, okay, if I'm going to move forward, I got to do something differently. When you got a divorce, when you had a child, when you got a promotion, any of these things are changes, and there was a sequence of events. Doesn't mean they're all worth telling, but they are all options for stories.
So that's a great question. So people can, right after this, take out a pen and ask themselves, what was a time when there was a change in my life? Write up, like, what were the things that happened before? What was the change? What were the things that happened afterwards? And what was the lesson that I learned? And that's it. And then you have, like, you just keep going through. You can go from early years to present years to,
to yesterday.
Yes. And then you start developing your story bank and then thinking about, like, what are the lessons here?
Mm-hmm.
How, again, back to serving your audience and back to serving whoever you're sharing this with, whether it's someone at the office, whether you're just an individual contributor or you're a leader and you have a team or you have a business. How can I serve with this particular lesson after I've shared this piece? And then again, what season are we in? And is this the right story to share at this particular time?
And this is how you generate content too, is you track back and you go to this story bank and you realize, like, what story can I tell today? Oh, I'll do an Instagram post. I'll post a cute picture of my daughter and I'll tell a story about her facing monsters, right? Right? That's a classic thing people can relate to. Every toddler has faced monsters, right? And we face monsters as adults too, don't we? That monster is a metaphor. So anything that scares us is a monster. So the lesson is embedded in there, and I'm telling it through a cute, adorable photo and story that I experienced with my 3-year-old, right? So you create that story bank, and then you understand what stories can be told for what purpose to whom, right? Another mistake people make, besides thinking there's one story, is thinking that you have to tell or have some epic tale to create influence and impact on someone, and you don't. In fact, most often, Joy, it's the little stories that make the most impact, because it's the little stories that we can relate to. We can all relate to. Everybody, when I told that story about driving and picking up my daughter, etc., to the grad class last week, everybody understood, because everybody's been cut off in traffic before. Not everybody has hiked Mount Kilimanjaro, right? Now, some people have, or some people are hikers and they want to, and they'll relate to it, but not everybody can relate to this. Not everybody is a refugee who is, escaped and came to America and started a business and became a doctor, et cetera, like these epic tales. You don't have to have experienced or lived that life. All you have to have is experience some transformation. And folks, that happens every day. Small levels, medium levels, and large levels.
Thank you for saying that, because I think that is one of the biggest hangups people have, because they think, because they're like, I have to have that hero's journey.
Who cares about my story?
Right.
Yeah.
My story is not really important. It's not really interesting. I haven't really had a lot of trouble in life. So, why would this be interesting? So I love that. So it's you don't have to have a singular story. It's not just one story. And two, it does not have to be a big epic tale. This is not Lord of the Rings
exactly.
or any other sort of like big hero's journeys.
And I love what you said about just asking yourself, like giving yourself that little questionnaire, like, what have I experienced? Everything is a story. Everything is a story. I'm refinancing a rental property that I have right now. That's a journey. There's been some lessons learned, and there's been some frustrating times. We're supposed to close later today, actually, right? And so there's things that I've learned, and there's been transformation during that point. I know what I'll never do again. There are some universal themes embedded that don't necessarily have to apply to the refinance space, but maybe it's not worth telling. But there is a story there, right? My mom came and visited this week for 3 days. There's a story there somewhere. Everything is stories around us. That's what people need to understand. And so I've said it a couple of times. I'll keep reiterating it. We complicate things. We don't have to. Relax, calm down, understand what they are, and then you'll see that they're all around you, and then you can just pluck them out of the air, out of your mind, and use them how you want to. That's what I want people to do.
So how can being better at, or being more practiced, let me say that, at telling stories and using stories help someone in their career? And specifically help someone, because what I talk to with the listeners is helping them to get paid to be themselves. So how can stories help you get paid to be yourself?
Now, this is right up my alley, because stories can be, again, we establish stories are for connections, so they can be used to get a job, to hire someone, to lead people, all sorts of ways in business, to sell your products, to design your products, etc. But now we're talking about creating a business around yourself, which is precisely what I have done. And this is what fuels me. And these are the people that I serve the most. I get really excited if you can't tell. And folks that aren't seeing the video, my hands are going everywhere.
He is very, very excited.
So the first part of that, this is a 2-part thing, is storytelling helps you understand your story better. Where did things change? What lesson did I learn? How did I end up here? Why am I the storytelling guy? Well, I gave a piece of that. I've known it my whole life, but then it really peaked during that movie that I was making a few years ago, 5 years ago. So it helps you understand your journey and your story and how you ended up where you ended up and why, and serving the people that you do. And then it helps you clearly communicate that to the people that you serve. This is another place where we complicate things, where we try to be clever, or we try to add too much information to make ourselves look like whatever, look good, look better. This helps us simply communicate what we do and for whom and how through a story as well. So again, it helps us understand what we do differently and why than anyone else in our space. And then it helps us communicate that to the people that we serve.
So it's a great way to set yourself apart and brand yourself.
Big time.
And so, I have an episode about like what they create is their brand. And I really feel like creating and storytelling are so interwoven that what you create is a way of telling the story of who you are, telling the story of your gifts and what you bring out and put out into the world. And you can use storytelling to talk about what you're creating and articulating that and what you have to bring and what you have to offer.
Absolutely. And we talked earlier about asking yourself, what was the time where something changed and what was the lesson that I learned? You use the same model with understanding what you do differently to separate yourself. So if you want to build a business around yourself and you're like, I'm tired of working this job. I want to just do what I want to do, which is a lot of people feel this way now, especially with the Great Resignation. Like, people are pursuing this more than ever before. You do the same model. You look back at your life, say, well, what have I learned and what have I experienced that gives me a unique perspective or approach or philosophy on life or the work that I do, the things that I am good at. So for me, it's filmmaking and writing. That's what I do. What is my unique path? Like, what are the lessons I've learned along the way? Now, that movie gave me a significant lesson, but so did other aspects of my life. So did other events or stories in my life. And when I do that process on a macro level, because I went through this transformation, what year is it now? 2022, around 2017, I was having this conversation with myself. And you look at your story now, which is the big one, the couple seasons of The Sopranos here, and you say, well, what did I learn? What are the lessons that I learned that maybe someone else did? And then you start to understand what you do differently than other people and what you love to do. Now, I knew I wanted to serve people in the storytelling space, but I had to develop my own thesis, my own philosophy, so that I would stand out. Or more importantly, it is about standing out, but it's about finding your people. I have a podcast called The Storytelling Lab. I have on storytellers every week that could be considered competition. They're keynote speakers, they're storytelling coaches. They do what I do, but they do it differently because they came at it from a different path. I told you mine. I came at it from boots on the ground documentary filmmaking. Some people come from being a marketer for Google, in a different perspective. Some people come at it from different stories, different journeys. And so if you do that same process, it'll help you identify what you can do based off of your skills, your passions, and your experiences. And the things that lie in the middle of a 3-part Venn diagram will help you find a lane that you can build a business based off of who you are as a person. It's there. There are lessons that you've learned. And once you establish the lessons you've learned in your journey, you can identify who would benefit from those lessons. Once I established my philosophy on storytelling for video, I understood who I served. I say this all the time. I don't help Nike or Apple or Budweiser tell great stories. They use the best agencies in the world to do that, and they are some of the best storytelling brands that do that. I help people that look like I did 5 years ago, either solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, small to medium businesses, mom and pop shops, influencers and creators, nonprofits, anybody who has a small team, 1 to 3 to 10, that is overwhelmed and under-resourced. That's who I help specifically. That's because that's who I was. And so my lessons learned help those people more than if I went to someone with a $10 million marketing budget. Like, my philosophy is about like, hey, you can just use your phone. I'd get laughed out of the door, right? Because they're like, yeah, we don't need that. We have a production team in-house. Like, so now what do? I can still help them with storytelling, but my specific approach is, you have all the tools that you need right now if you focus on the story. So that helps people who are like, oh, what platform should I be on? Should I start a TikTok? I don't know. I mean, I'm not very good with camera. I'm not very good on camera. Like, what do I do? Calm down. You're a storyteller. Understand how to communicate with people, and then use whatever you have. Start off with your phone. Then you get better. Then you add tools to the toolbox along the way so you can do it more effectively and efficiently, but you can do it now.
What you're calling us to do is to appreciate what we have in front of us, to appreciate the gifts that we have available to us, to appreciate our own unique lessons, whatever those are, and have a belief that whatever lesson I have is for a reason, and that there's someone who needs my particular lesson. There's someone who's going to benefit. If you were trying to do what everybody else was doing, you would have been in a crowded market, but you were committed to your own story, committed to the lesson that you learned, and are able to serve people who need you, who probably didn't have someone who was able to give them that before. And it applies across the board for all of us, whether people are into storytelling or video telling. Everyone who's listening has their own gift, and it's different from everyone else.
Definitely.
And unless you're committed to honoring that, there are so many people who need what you have to serve them with, who are going to miss out because you're thinking you have to be like everyone else.
This is one of the things people overlook and neglect and make mistakes with the most. And I'm glad we're talking about this. It's thinking that they don't have something worth telling. Listen, there are plenty of people that have your skills. Plenty of people out there in the world. And many of them are more skilled than you will ever be. But nobody in this whole wide world has your story. Not one other person. It may be similar, but it's not your story. Why are you not leveraging that more? It is the one thing that makes you stand out and will make you stand out among anything else. Yes, you may be a superstar, right? But there are other superstars. You might be a Hall of Fame wide receiver, but there's a bunch of those. What is different about your story? And when you understand that, after the football career is done and you're a Hall of Famer, you can pivot to do something else. And you can become the person who then continues to rise, or you can become the person who used to be.
I love that word, pivot. So your stories can be used to help you pivot in life, pivot in your career, pivot in so many different ways. Okay, you're getting more excited now.
Well, because the more you understand your story clearly and what you have to uniquely offer, how you deliver those gifts that you have can always change. And we never learned this more than we did in the pandemic. And the people who didn't know what they clearly do, and they pigeonholed and boxed themselves into, like, I'm just a filmmaker. Then when the film business stopped, or a speaker is more appropriate, right? I'm a speaker, and when the speaking industry stopped, they didn't know what to do. Or if they realized, I help people tell their stories better. That's what I do. I'm not a speaker. That's just one way in which I do the thing that I do. So when speaking goes away, I could become a coach, which is exactly what I did. I can write a book, which is another thing I did, right? How can you serve people? And you can't pivot like that. You can't change, you can't grow if you don't fully understand what it is you uniquely do versus someone else. And when you do, that is a superpower that will benefit you the rest of your life, because you know that how you use that can always change, because that's the surface level of the story. And what we're focused on is the core, the heart of the story, what you really do to help people.
So what's the next most important thing that folks can do to get started on this? I think we've shared some tips, shared some nuggets, but what can people start doing today that's really going to help them get down the road on this?
Yes, absolutely. So we talk a lot about, and we have talked today a lot about the big picture and the heartfelt stuff and all that. And this is what, and I know people feel frustrated with this at times. And I actually made a video about this recently because people ask about it. I'm like, yeah, I hear you. I understand all that. But like, how do I start today? Like, what are the action steps? Because often you hear people, gurus, experts, influencers say, like, just take action, just do it, right? And I made a joke in a video the other day. I was like, that's literally like just saying, if you want to play basketball, just go play basketball. It's like, all right, that's not realistic. Where do I start?
Yeah.
And just like basketball, you start with the basics. You start with the fundamentals. You start where I started. I knew storytelling was the thing I was passionate about and I could use to help people. And then what do I have to do? Go back and learn from people. Learn storytelling structure. So I can tell you, hey, any sequence of events that created change in your life is a story. Cool, Rain. But literally, how do I tell that to people? You have to understand basic storytelling structure, and there is a plethora of resources out there for you. There is a myriad of storytelling formulas and structures you can follow. The one that I use to help people is Ken Adams's The Story Spine. It's an 8-step story structure that is used by Pixar. Of course, we alluded to the hero's journey, which is a little more complicated. It's like 17 steps.
Yeah, it's complicated.
But you need to, you need to look at these storytelling structures and understand how you lay things out. This is what I help people do as well. I'll give a very short version of it today, but I want people to dive into it. And there's books, there's podcasts, my podcast, there's articles, videos, whole films made about this. But just to help people understand is simply, someone has a problem that they're trying to overcome, and they go on a quest. There is a journey to overcome that problem, and then there's a resolution of that problem. That's the transformation. And if you really want to reduce it down to its simplest form, it's like Amazing Grace. I once was lost, and now I am found. It's a cause and effect 2-part thing. But what we need to really make it a full story is that middle piece. How were you found? I was here. I was lost. This is what I was struggling with. I didn't know how to connect with people through my email list. And then I went and I took Rain Bennett's email list course. That doesn't really exist, folks. Maybe it should. And I learned simple steps to be more engaging. And now my email list has grown, but more importantly, it converts. That's a story, right? So there is a problem and a journey to solve the problem and a resolution of that problem. Okay, it's simple. That's the simple 3-part. Aristotle said it too. Just a beginning, middle, and end. Simple 3 parts. But there are plenty of storytelling structures. And listen, I'll give you another little tip. Look at nursery rhymes. Look at children's books. They're the good ones, the classics, all have that structure. Look at movies, the classically structured movies that you love, Disney movies, Pixar movies, things like that stand the test of time. Shawshank Redemption, any of these kind of like big hit movies, Star Wars, have that structure. And if that's too complicated, go to nursery rhymes and children's books. It's always about transformation. And again, don't overcomplicate it. There is a problem that a person wants to solve, and they go on a journey to solve that problem, a quest. They try this, it doesn't work. They try that, it doesn't work. And finally, they find the thing that does it. And now here's their life.
A really good one that I like is Kendra Hall's Normal Explosion New Normal. It's literally, this is what, this was the normal, this was the status quo once upon a time. And then it was like, then one day suddenly, boom, something happened, transformation, change, challenge. And then in the end, this is how it resolved. It's as simple as that.
And you want to see that transformation happens, right? If you just a sequence of events, that's not going to be exciting or compelling. There has to be a sequence of events where transformation happened.
Powerful. So what are you doing these days that my listener might be interested in checking out, learning more about, or getting involved? I know you have a new book, 6-Second Stories. So tell us more about that and how people can dig into that and help support them on this journey of telling more stories in their life, in their work, and helping them to pivot and do all the things they want to do.
Absolutely. I have a couple of things that I think would help people. And I kind of have a two-headed monster approach to the work that I do. One is helping people understand how to execute stories. And that's more the structure that we were just talking about, what platforms to use, how to use video to be more compelling, et cetera. And so my book, 6-Second Stories, maximize your impact in minimal time with video storytelling. 6-Second Stories. Like, if you have 6 seconds, can you get someone to be inspired to take action? Can you connect with them on a deeper, heartfelt level in 6 seconds? It's a real challenge, but it's possible. And then the other way is helping people do the other thing we talked about today, which is like find their own story, build a business around themselves. I have a course on that. I talk a lot about that. I have a podcast, the Storytelling Lab. So I would suggest people just go to reimagining.com. And you see all of these things. I give weekly storytelling tips for free in an email newsletter. The book had a great response. The book, what I like the most, I think about for my journey with the book, is organizations getting them for their staff. And there's bundle pricing for that. And I sign them. For everyone. We'll get 50 and 60, orders, and I'll sit down and I'll sign each one and personalize them. But that really means a lot to me, because that means a business or an organization thinks that their people would benefit from it. I know an individual would, but that's a real investment, right? That's a real belief in the work that I've done. So that makes me feel very happy and proud when that happens. But yeah, that's been something that's been a really important part of my journey, and that's really the lessons that I learned when I dove into storytelling in 2017, and for the next 4 years consumed everything that I could and had the podcast. This is really my philosophy on storytelling, and it will not be the final book. I have several that I'm working on now and trying to figure out which one will be next, talking about a lot of these topics. But this is what I love to do. I love my work.
What are other ways that people are using and sort of delivering their stories? I know I have the podcast, you have a podcast, and you do and show people around video. But what are some other ways? Because I think for some people, these medians might still feel like a bit of a heavy lift and a barrier. What are other ways that people can still share and deliver stories?
That's a good point. I would encourage people to lean into video, and I know it might be scary, but at this point, I think it's over 80% of online traffic is video traffic. It is not going anywhere, and that's why my book is about video storytelling. But as if it hasn't been made apparent now, I don't put the cart before the horse. Storytelling comes first and then video, where a lot of people think it's video and then I'll learn how to be a good storyteller. That is a combination of this timeless tool that we've always had for connection and communication with the most powerful technological tool that we have right now, which is video. Look at what we're doing right now. We're on a video, right? This is how we're connecting with humans in 2022 in a lot of ways. But it is still a lift for some people, and it's vulnerable, or it's challenging for some people. Let's go back to the very beginning of our conversation. This will be the perfect place to end because we're bringing it full circle. Storytelling is how humans communicate and create connections. How you do it doesn't matter as much. It's just about getting it across to other people. So how can we do it? Anytime you speak to someone, anytime you send any message is an opportunity to tell a story. We were just talking about email lists. You should be telling stories in your email list. Texting people, right? If you're not comfortable with video, but you have a Twitter, you can tell a story in a tweet. It's just transformation, right? A sequence of events that created change. Remember, you can do that in a tweet, an Instagram post with pictures, right? You can show the change in a carousel with 7 pictures you can show, or 3 pictures. This is where I was, then this is where I was, then this is where I was. We built a house for Habitat for Humanity this week. You show the first stage, you show the middle when it's all done, and then you show the final product. Boom, you just told a story, folks. And you didn't have to put your face on video at all. And then you just accompany that with some text that expands on the story and shows the lesson learned or the transformation you experience. And now I understand, like what it's like to serve, whatever. I'm spitballing here, right? And it's there, but this is because I practice this muscle every single day. I want you folks to do the same thing. So any form of communication, text, audio, we mentioned podcasts, but there's Twitter Spaces now. There's, Clubhouse was real popular a year ago. I think it's still out there, but the explosion is gone, but plenty of different places. Graphics, video, of course, but any medium that you have that communicates is a potential for you to use storytelling. And then you can also get up there and join a storytelling slam and go tell a story for 100 people drinking beers and get judged and maybe win, lots of different ways.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much, Rain. I appreciate you coming and sharing. You have brought the nuggets and all the knowledge, dropped the mic many times. And so I know that everyone listening has gotten a lot out of this. I know I have, and some practical tips that they can get started with storytelling.
I'll say before we leave, I know people do struggle about that, and we didn't spend a lot of time on the practical stuff, but that's because we had to do the heartfelt work first before we do the head, the small decisions, right? So if anyone is ever interested in reaching out, I say this any workshop that I do, I love what I do. Do not be a stranger. My name is Rain Bennett. There are not that many of us in the world. Shout out to my mom for that. RainBennett.com. If you want to send me an email, I promise you I will respond. I'm happy to answer any questions because the practical tips are very important, and often we don't get to that. We talk about high-level theory and strategy, but not the boots on the ground. All right, how do I do it? What do I do today? And I'm happy to share more about that.
Thank you. Thank you, Rain.
My pleasure.
That was so much fun and so insightful. I hope you got the good news, my creating maven. You're already a storyteller because you're human. Now, it's just time to practice. You don't just have one story. You have many. And the ones you share don't have to be epic tales. Your stories are all around you. All throughout your day, you're experiencing events that have a beginning, middle, and end, and that show moments of transformation. You just have to see it and pull out the lesson and practice telling it so you can share it with the people you're here to serve. Knowing your story will not only help you know who you are, it'll also help you share more about what you create. In the show notes, I've shared links to some of the storytelling resources we refer to in this conversation so you can research to your heart's delight. But really, truly, if you got one thing from this conversation today, I hope you got that this isn't something to overthink. You're already a storyteller just because you're human. To get started, take out a pen and write down the answer to these questions. When was a time when there was a change in my life? What were the things that happened before the change? What was the change? And what happened afterward? And finally, what was the lesson I learned? You can find Rain's book, 6-Second Stories, on Amazon and follow his podcast, The Storytelling Lab, anywhere you listen to your podcasts. Take him up on his offer to ask him more questions and connect with him on his website, RainBennett.com, and on any of his social media handles I've shared in the show notes. It's time to tell at least one of your stories. If you're ready to work on it, email me at joy@reframetocreate.com and ask me about my story brand coaching package. Your story is waiting to be told. See you soon, Creating Maven. Until then, remember to always ask yourself, what will I create?